Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. The Polish heavyweight prospect Damian Knyba has advanced to 16-0 following a stoppage win over compatriot Marcin Siwy, who had a very bloated record. This fight ending on cuts after the 8th round, and the fight was on the Vito Mielnicki card at the Prudential Center in the United States. So this fight definitely not going down as a classic, and I've certainly got some questions about Knyba and where he goes next. But first, let's talk about the fight, because ahead of this, Knyba had talked about putting on a show for the fans, and look, you can see here is the quote from the press conference, and we didn't necessarily sort of see that. And he'd also stated elsewhere that this was a performance that he was going to put on where he probably really should be stopping Marcin Siwy in about 3 rounds. And it didn't happen. And actually, Knyba at times, especially in the first 3 or 4 rounds, looked a little bit disconnected. Couldn't really sort of put it together. He looked okay when he was boxing at range, working the jab, but the right hand wasn't finding a home. He wasn't able to sort of solve the puzzle, which was a very basic Marcin Siwy in front of him, who couldn't do anything at range and basically was barreling forward. And as the commentator said at one point, he throws wide punches, so he's got a wide left hook, a wide right hook, and then he's also got his head, because he leads with his head. It's almost like an extra punch. So it wasn't exactly sort of pretty stuff to watch in the early going, and Damian Knyba having a little bit of trouble, it's fair to say, trying to really sort of solve the puzzle, which was Marcin Siwy, and it should have been a much easier puzzle to solve. So he did look a little bit disjointed, a little bit one-paced, lacked a little bit of variation, but where things started to look a little bit brighter for Knyba was rounds 4 and 5, when uppercuts started to come in, and the body shots, especially in round 5, started to rain in. And there were a couple of really solid body shots in round 5 to the very burly Marcin Siwy, who's roughly about 6 foot, and has heavily muscled, 245 pounds or so. And you had Siwy visibly, sort of the air almost going out of the balloon, as it were, and deflating somewhat from those body shots. But for the next couple of rounds, Damian Knyba still giving too much respect. You could see Marcin Siwy was visibly starting to wilt on the vine, and not a lot coming back from him. What was coming back was the odd sort of jumping left hook, or basically just trying to tie up. There wasn't a lot, in terms of activity from Marcin Siwy in the final few rounds of this fight, but there was a hesitancy from Knyba to really sort of step on the gas, and it almost looked, especially in round 6 and 7, like the referee, with Knyba starting to land more shots. There was the odd flurry, body shots coming in, and he opened up a decent cut over Marcin Siwy's right eye. That, the body language wasn't good for Siwy, and he looked like he was ripe for the picking, but just a hesitancy and a lack of urgency from Knyba to sort of keep his foot on the throat and really sort of make things happen, jump in, make the referee end the fight. Ultimately, it was round 8. Again, sort of the final 3 rounds of this fight, putting it on Marcin Siwy, body shots. There was a decent little flurry, but he managed to get to the end. And as it happened with, I think it was maybe the end of round 6, the doctor had a look at the end of round 8, didn't like the state of that eye, and the referee calls it off. So Damian Knyba, the record stays intact, stays unbeaten. And I had been thinking with Siwy, because he'd built this massively padded record, and he was one of these guys about 5 or 6 years ago where I was just sort of saying, look, someone just take that because it looks right for the picking. And it looked for a time that he was trying to build himself to a decent money fight. But obviously his options had dried up in recent years. He'd had a draw with Kamil Sokolowski in 2022, hadn't fought since. So clearly needed the money, needed the payday. And perhaps the visions of getting a big fight for a really big bag had disappeared completely out the window. So you could sort of say, well, maybe a bit rusty heading into this one, but very basic. Didn't really have a lot for Knyba. Didn't really land many telling punches in the fight at all. Couple of left hooks which landed, which is a little bit of a concern for Knyba because he does sort of pull back and the right arm is down, so he can be vulnerable to that shot, as we saw at points in this fight. But overall, there wasn't really a lot coming back. The most effective weapon for Marcin Siwy in this fight was his head, where he did cause a little bit of a nick over Knyba's right eye. Was it round 2 or 3? But that didn't really develop into anything. But the performance from Knyba himself, yeah, it wasn't dynamic. It wasn't one of these memorable ones. Often guilty of smothering himself as well. You know, he'd sort of get a couple of shots together and just get in his own way. And not much of an inside game, or at least not much of an effective one. And it just wasn't super fluid. There were moments where he'd be good on the jab, land a right hand, but in terms of it being a spectacle and one that would sort of get fans interested in Knyba as an exciting fighter, yeah, not so much this fight. It wasn't a great advert for him, but also it sort of raises the question, because I sort of thought, yeah, Knyba looks like he hasn't developed a whole lot since I sort of saw him last. It's like, well, where is the ceiling? And bearing in mind, you know, he's been out of the ring for a year. He looked a bit rusty himself, but you'd hope, you know, 29 years old and training full time, that there would be, you know, a guy at this point in his career, you'd hope to see just a little bit more polish in terms of where he's at. So it does beg the question, well, where is the ceiling for Damian Knyba? And I guess the other question is now, well, what now? What are they going to do? Is this a guy that, because he's got this record of 16-0, is he going to be, because he's in the top ranked stable, is this a potential opponent for Richard Torres? And if you were to sort of say, well, okay, if they pair them together, I would certainly pick Torres in that one. Despite the severe reach deficit Torres would have, he's just much more dynamic. Knyba, sometimes a little bit slow and lumbering, not necessarily always on target with his shots, and I think someone who is got good footwork and good speed can certainly find some holes in Knyba's defence. But also the question is, well, who else is out there? What sort of level of fight? Because at 16-0, you've got to start taking bigger steps up than a limited Marcin Siwy. Are we talking about, because Guido Vianello, you know, is that a potential for him? He's coming off that loss to Richard Torres. Should Vianello have a fight, because he's in the top ranked stable, with Damian Knyba? Big opportunity for Knyba. There's others out there as well. Aslanbek Makhmudov, he's coming back from, you know, a couple of down performances in the past year or two. He's fighting Ricardo Brown soon. Would that be a potential option? He's co-promoted by Top Rank. So there are some names within the Top Rank stable, and also those who sometimes work with Top Rank. So what could they do? Is Bakadir Jalalov a name potentially? Stefan Shaw, or even bring in Joseph Goodall, who's the Australian who's had a couple of fights on Top Rank before. I think there's names in and about the sort of top 25 to top sort of 45 that probably are appropriate for a Damian Knyba, especially as he really does need to step through the levels. So it's not going to go down as a classic, and, you know, the performance just okay by Damian Knyba. Marcin Siwy, well, he was always there for the taking. I've been saying for years it only takes someone with a little bit of ambition and talent, and they probably will take the O of Siwy, and so it occurred. What did you make of it all? Drop a comment loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.